All right, guys, this morning I have something special for you in terms of food for thought. This has to do with how children feel and what they're thinking. Being a parent is kind of rewarding, not just kind of rewarding, but could be very rewarding and also very frustrating and sometimes heartbreaking. But how do the children feel? What do they think? Because they have issues of their own. And and despite the fact that we might wag our finger in their face and tell them, we know what it was like to be your age, we were that age once, likewise, um, I think it can be all too easy to actually forget what it was like because as um, as neurological science has proven, our memories aren't always reliable, and so sometimes we fabricate a different background that we came from, and we think to ourselves that we might have done it better, or our parents might have done it better with us. But times don't really change. I mean, they seem to, but in terms of child-parent relationships, I don't think they really change. And so here's what I want to emphasize to you this morning. I'm gonna recount something for you that I hope will really embed itself in your mind. Now, this has to do with uh, uh, a Sunday school teacher back in 1953 named Mrs. Imogene Frost, who asked her Sunday school students to write down the, the the problem that they have with grown-ups, what their complaints were. And so she ended up turning around and proffering it to Reader's Digest, and there were 12 things on this list. Now, listen up carefully and see if you can relate to any of them. Perhaps you're guilty on these counts, and then maybe it'll jog your memory, and you'll suddenly recall that you had the same issues as a child yourself with your parents. And so here are the 12 things. Number one, here's what they said. Now, I don't know how old these children were. They didn't say how old the children in the Sunday school class were, but obviously they were old enough to express themselves and how they felt. So here's number one. Number one, grown-ups make promises, then forget all about them, or else they say it wasn't really a promise, just a maybe. Guilty. But I will say, I learned a long time ago to stop making promises. I learned that when my children were much younger than they are now. I have four. I have four children: a 21-year-old girl, a 19-year-old boy, a 15-year-old girl, and a 14-year-old boy. So I did learn that a long time ago. Don't make promises unless you know that they're easy to fulfill and that you can fulfill them quickly. Okay. It has to be something you can do very soon within saying it. Otherwise, don't make a promise at all. If it's just a maybe, say that it's just a maybe. Okay, number two, grown-ups don't do the things they're always telling the children to do, like pick up their things or be neat or always tell the truth. Ow. Well, I can honestly say we try to be truthful with our kids, but everybody flubs up. I do think that what you can take away from this point right here is that it is paramount that you set a good example for your children. If you're telling your children to keep their room clean and you're not keeping yours clean, you might want to take a look at that. If you're anything that you're telling them to do, make sure that you're exemplifying that. Set a really good example. All right, number three, grown-ups won't let their children dress the way they want to, but they never ask a child's opinion about how they should dress. If they're going out to a party, grown-ups wear just exactly what they want to wear, even if it looks terrible, even if it isn't warm enough. Um, this is a really good point, and unless a child was to say it, I don't think we'd know it. Um, I think it is important to consider the opinions of children in a lot of ways, not just in the ways that we dress, but I think it makes them feel important and included when you go to them and you ask their opinion on different things, like what they would do, where they would go, what they want, what they would wear. And I think it makes them feel wanted, needed, and important. So try to make that a habit. All right, so number four, grown-ups never really listen to what children have to say. They always decide ahead of time what they're going to answer. You know, I yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. We do think we already have all the answers. We've heard the discourse plenty of times from children, uh, and they are they do repeat themselves quite a bit, but so do we. So do we. And the main thing here is that it's important to stop talking, and it's important to stop thinking ahead and just actually listen to what they're saying. Hopefully it hasn't got to the point where they don't talk to you at all. And that does happen. In the teenage years, there comes a point where they don't want to talk to you at all, but remain open to their opinions, remain open to what they have to say without trying to come up with an answer first, because they might say they might say something just a little bit different and makes you realize you didn't really have it all figured out. Okay, number 5, grown-ups make mistakes, but they won't admit them. They always pretend that they weren't mistakes at all, or that somebody else made them. Wow, this is something to keep in mind. Be honest with your children. If you messed up, you know, admit it. If you messed up with them, especially admit it. I think it's crucial to learn to apologize, even though that's not exactly what this point was saying. But I do think that's an important factor in all of this. But they need to see that you're vulnerable. They need to see that you're human, and they need to see that you're humble. So make it a point to admit that you're not perfect, that you didn't have it figured out, and that you did act on your own flawed wisdom, right? Learn to apologize. Number 6, grown-ups interrupt children all the time and think nothing of it. If a child interrupts a grown-up, he gets a scolding or something worse. Yeah, I do think I'm guilty of that. I get told I am, that I interrupt them. I just think it's way too easy when you see yourself at a different level. Now, there are different levels to relationships. There is a hierarchy within the family structure. The children are not the same. The children are not the same as the parents. Okay, there is a difference, and children will oftentimes try to make themselves on the same levels of parents. You can't have that, but at the same time, I think it's important to I think it's important to not interrupt them and let them speak their minds. Let them get everything out, and don't scold them. When it comes to that. So number 7, grown-ups never understand how much children want a certain thing, a certain color or shape or size. If it's something they don't admire, even if children have spent their own money for it, they always say, "I can't imagine what you would want with that old thing." Yeah, I've said that quite a few times, actually. You know, you start to discover that your children are actually different than you. That's what it is. They're not the same as you, and you envision these little mini me's growing up to be just like you, but maybe perhaps better versions of yourself. But nevertheless, you have a movie reel playing in your head of how this is going to turn out. You see, it's not. You see that the script is not being acted out anything like you thought it would, and that they are completely their own person, and their interests are diverse. And so, when you see them pick up other things, or purchase other things, or decide on other things, you kind of balk at it a little bit, and it's not necessarily that you're so opposed to it. You're just kind of shocked and surprised. But the point here, I guess, would be to be respectful and show them that it's not so undesirable, because you may not be trying to convey that, but it may come across that way. And they need to have your approval. And you don't necessarily have to approve of everything they do and all the decisions they make, but at the same time, if they're not hurting anything, if they're just simply being themselves, don't give them so much of a problem about it, because they need to be who they are. All right. Number 8, sometimes grown-ups punish children unfairly. It isn't right if you've done something, if you've done just some little thing wrong, and grown-ups take away something that means an awful lot to you. Other times you can do something really bad, and they say they're going to punish you, but they don't. You never know, and you ought to know. That's pretty wise coming from children. Pretty wise. The reaction to a child's wrongdoing should be commensurate to uh, the level of their discrepancy. Okay, but it's all too easy to overreact when we see they've done something wrong. If what they did was just a little wrong, it should proffer just a little reaction. Um, if it's monumentally wrong, then the response should be tantamount. So I think that that has something to say. But this is a kind of a twofold response from this child here. He also said other times you can do something really bad and they say they're going to punish you, but they don't. I do believe it's important to follow through with a threat, and if it's real, it's not actually a threat; it's a promise, right? So if you say you're going to do something, actually do it. They need to know that you're good for your word. While they may not like it, they do count on it, and they need to know that that anytime in the future that you're good for your word. And I think that all of us are guilty of that. I know I am. I know I am. So I think another thing you have to keep in mind here is don't don't spew out threats and promises that you can't keep. It's kind of going back to another point, right? Only this is kind of on the negative side. Number 9, grown-ups talk about money too much and bills, things like that, so that it scares you. They say money isn't very important, but the way they talk about it, it sounds like the most important thing in the world. You know, they say that the thing that couples argue about the most is money, and that's because money is such a powerful thing in the way concerning the way we live. Everything revolves around it. It seems like, but your children should know that. You know, they see you as a rock, and when the rock begins to develop too many cracks, they begin to fear that it's going to crumble apart. Now, you may feel like, no, I've got this under control. My children shouldn't have to worry about any of that, and they really shouldn't. They really shouldn't. They can't take care of themselves financially. They rely completely upon you. But if you demonstrate fear and frustration too much in front of them, they're going to feel insecure and they're going to carry that with them the rest of their life. And they're going to develop habits in the future that are going to bear fruit in that way. So it's very important not only to rein in your fear and your response to it around your children about money, but about everything else too. They need to see you as a rock. While they need to know that you're not Superman, that you have faults, and that you have misgivings, that you're honest about it. They need to know that you can take care of them. All right, and they don't need to see that you're feeling weak about that any time. So number 10, grown-ups gossip a lot, but if children do the very same thing and say the same words about the same people, they're being disrespectful. This is a big one. You need to be very careful about how you talk about other people. In fact, you probably shouldn't be talking about other people in front of your children if it's in a negative way. Only do it if it's positive. And only do it if it's truthful and if it helps them. Okay? If it helps them. I could do probably a separate video on every single one of these points, and maybe that's a good idea, turn it into a series. But for the time being, be very careful about how you talk about other people. And if you do that, and you allow and if your children decide that they're going to talk about others, keep yourself in check. Ask yourself if they're doing it because they're mirroring you. Okay, number 11, grown-ups pry into children's secrets. They always think it's going to be something bad. They never think that it might be a nice surprise. We want to know what's going on with our children. We want to know what they're thinking, especially if it appears that something might not be right. But keep in mind that your children do need their own privacy. They need to have their own private thoughts. And that's just a respectful move on your part to make. Um, and and if you could remember back clearly, you had times that you didn't want to talk to your parents about anything because you were struggling on your own. And I do think it's important. I do think it's important to let children um, struggle with something and reason through things themselves. And if you give them enough room and enough respect, I do think they'll come back to you and talk to you and seek your advice. And when they do that, make sure you listen to them very clearly, and without interrupting them. Okay. So while I'm not the consummate parent, um, I have, my children are old enough to where I know a lot of this, what they're saying is absolutely true. And I'm guilty of a lot of it myself. So the last one, number 12. Grown-ups are always talking about what they did and what they knew when they were 10 years old, but they never try to think what it's like to be 10 years old right now. This is something where the times do change. Okay, our children are struggling with things that you and I never had any comprehension of back in our day. You know, when I was 10 years old, I was playing Pac-Man for the first time. I had two newspaper routes. You could work as a child and make your own money, and things are a little bit different now. It's not as safe as it used to be. It wasn't even as safe back then as we thought it was, but it's certainly not safe out there now with the number of predators that are out there and with the number of trolls that are out there online, because your children are doing a lot of things online, and it's peer, they still have the peer pressure that you and I had and the bullying, but it comes to them in a different way. And if you and I think that we can relate to them on every level, keep in mind that we cannot. We cannot. And that needs to be at the forefront of our minds when we see our children struggling with something, and when we see how they're living. It needs to be what tempers our experience with our children. Okay? And we don't know what it's like to be them at their age now. We only knew what it was like at our age, and the times were completely different. I hope these 12 things have helped. I really do. I hope that you've taken them to heart, and I hope it'll change the way that you do things with your own children, because I think it'll go a long ways. I think it will convey something to them. I think they'll get the message that you care, that you're listening, that you're respectful of them, that you're giving them room, and that you're allowing them to have private thoughts and private interests and diverse interests in and of themselves. So I think if you listen to them in this way, I think it was very brave of Mrs. Imogene Frost to do this. Is that her name? Is that her name right? Yes, Mrs. Imogene Frost. I think it was very brave of her to do this, but I think it's also very helpful as long as we're willing to embrace it and give them the time, the room, and the respect to grow and be themselves. And that's going to take some humility on our part. Guys, I hope you've liked this. If you do, if you like this kind of thing and you want to support my endeavor, consider contributing to this channel. Consider donating to this channel. I'll put a link in the description below that'll show you how to do that. But you don't have to. It'd be greatly appreciated, and I'll give you a shout out on the following video. And if you haven't subscribed, I would ask you to do that. It would help me out a lot. I have a lot of other videos like this that I think you'll like. And then if you've liked this video, hit the thumbs up. This video went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.